All right, today we're going to be talking about the Great War, which is later called World War I. The causes of the Great War were basically there's 5 causes. The first one is militarization, that European countries around the world were building up their militaries, very large armies, and developing new weapons. You also have nationalism, where the people in European countries were extremely prideful and loyal to their country. Imperialism is another one. That conflict over the colonial territories was increasing the tensions and leading up to the conflict. And you also had alliances. There were 2 alliances that you really need to know about. The Triple Alliance, which is between Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary, and the Triple Entente, which is between Britain, France, and Russia. Okay? Now, these alliances, basically, if one person went to war, they'd all go to war in support of those people that they were allied with. So this gets a lot of countries involved in the Great War. Now, the thing that actually started the war, the very first thing, was what's called the shot heard around the world. And it's the way what happened was there was a small country called Serbia that had been taken over by Austria-Hungary. And Serbia wanted its independence, and so that they were almost willing to go fight for it. And Russia supported Serbian independence. Remember, if Russia goes to war, everybody goes to war. So, well, one day the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, which was set to take the throne of Austria-Hungary, was assassinated by a Serbian. And then Austria-Hungary declares war, Russia declares war, and everybody else gets into war as well. So the countries take sides. Now, the alliances that there were in the beginning don't exactly stay the same. It switches over to be the Allied powers versus the Central Powers. Central Powers being Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire. And they're called the Central Powers because they're in the center of Europe. And then you have the Allied powers, which is Britain, France, Russia, Italy, and then Japan, which is not on this map. And a bunch of other smaller countries too. And then there's one really important neutral country, which is the United States. The United States does not join the war or take a side, initially anyways. So fighting begins, and in the Great War they did something called total war. This is when a whole country participates in the war. They're either going to be drafted as soldiers, if they're, or they're going to work in factories to produce supplies or weapons for the war. And because the people are working in factories to produce these arms and weapons, they're often also targeted in the war as well. And a lot of times in this, during the Great War, women would fill the role of men as men were out fighting. They would go work in the factories, which they had not been previously doing that much of. And so after the war, the women are actually going to earn the right to vote. And they're going to start getting a little bit more equality with that as well. Now, as the fighting began, Germany used what's called the Schlieffen Plan. The Schlieffen Plan is where they wanted to go and conquer the countries extremely quick, to invade very fast before they had time to actually set up a defense. They wanted to go in, conquer France, and then leave and go conquer Russia on the other side. But this didn't actually work out that well, because when they got to France, they encountered what's called trench warfare. And this is where they sort of dig trenches in the ground to set up a defense. And basically trench warfare, here you can see it in this picture here, the trenches that are dug, slowed down the war and added to the casualties. A lot more people died because of trench warfare. But the Central Powers were slowly gaining territory. Another thing that made the death toll go up was new weapons, such as machine guns, heavy artillery, which are these even larger cannons, flamethrowers, grenades, tanks, submarines, ships, and planes. All increased the amount of people that were dying. So the Central Powers were slowly winning the war, but the U.S. is going to come in and help them out. Now, initially the U.S. was making a lot of money. Generally this is referred to as the military-industrial complex, where you are supplying the weapons and supplies to another country and making a lot of money off of war. But eventually the U.S. decides to join, and there's two reasons why they decided to join. One is unrestricted submarine warfare. The Germans were attacking basically anybody that they saw fit, and there was especially one ship called the Lusitania, which had a bunch of U.S. citizens on that was sank, and as these citizens died, it created outrage in the United States. You also have something called the Zimmerman telegram, and this was a letter that was intercepted as it was going from Germany to Mexico, and Germany was actually asking Mexico to fight against the United States. But the United States does decide to join, and once they join, the Allies start winning the Great War. So after the U.S. joins, the Allies win. They have to figure out sort of a resolution once especially Germany is defeated. Now, President Wilson of the United States comes up with something called the 14 points. This was a peaceful resolution. It balanced power in Europe, and it also didn't punish the Central Powers. It didn't punish them for attacking. And they thought that this would create, he thought that this would create enduring peace in Europe, but they didn't use that solution. They went and signed something called the Treaty of Versailles, and basically this was a peace agreement. It ended the war, but it punished the Central Powers. It broke up Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. They were broken up to a bunch of smaller countries. Germany had its colonial territory taken from it, and it had all these debts paid. It basically had to pay for all the damage done in France and Britain. Then they also created the League of Nations. Now, after the war was over, they wanted an organization to keep people from fighting later on. They wanted this organization to be able to solve these conflicts, but they didn't give the League of Nations any power, so it doesn't actually, it's not able to solve these problems in the future. And later on, when we get to World War II, we'll talk about the Treaty of Versailles causing a lot of problems and actually contributing to World War II as well.